My name is Emilio Rodriguez. I am the artistic director and co-founder of Black and Brown Theater. I identify as a Latino male and part of the LGBTQ plus community. And my primary focus is I'm a writer, but I sometimes direct and I oftentimes produce. The reason I got into writing was actually to write roles for myself because I was just looking through monologue books and I was looking through plays and I was like, none of these fit, none of these show what I can do. I can't be any of these roles. And I didn't like what I was being cast as well. So I started just writing and then I realized that other people were having the same experience. And so when I was writing these stories, then other actors would say, oh my gosh, this is my first time playing like a leading role, or this is my first time playing a character who's not this kind of stereotype, or that I don't have to talk about. I don't have to exploit this part of my identity. It could just be my identity, and then the story is the focus. And hearing all of that was really what inspired me to, okay, keep writing and still write the roles that you want to play, but allow other people to play them. For me, I was so inspired by people like John Leguizamo and Charlene Woodard, who were writing roles for themselves, that I got to see those shows, particularly when I was living in LA. I got to see both John Leguizamo and Charlene Woodard shows and one person shows that they wrote for themselves. So I had always had this idea of that it was possible. But when I made the decision that I wanted to train and actively take playwriting classes and not just delve into it without any knowledge. So when I was taking the classes, they were oftentimes teaching traditional playwriting scenes like dialogue. So I had went into these classes with the mindset that I was going to do what John Leguizamo and Charlene Woodard were doing, which was one person shows, and they were all teaching like scene dialogue. So that was a switch for me. But I think the cool thing that came out of it, or the benefit that came out of it for me, was that I started writing each of these scenes as if I was playing each of the characters. And I think that allowed me as a writer to, sometimes I get critiques that all of my plays are really small casts, but then some people love that. But for me, that came from, I wanted every character to be important to the story because I saw myself as I was writing it, I envisioned myself playing every single character. So if any character I felt like I wouldn't want to play them, then they get deleted from the script. And that's why I tend to have these smaller casts, which have been great for COVID. But sometimes it does have its critiques, particularly if colleges or high schools are looking for, or community theaters are looking for a cast of like 20 people. I don't know if I could write that because I would have a hard time seeing all 20 people as integral to the story. That's actually what inspired the creation of Black and Brown Theater, because in California, it was normal. It wasn't even talked about to see a play where there would be five characters and one actor would be Black and one would be Asian and one would be Latino and one would be white and one would be Arab. Like nobody made a big deal about that. It was just like, of course, this is LA. It's just reflecting what the city is. So when I moved to Michigan and I wasn't seeing that, it became it was like a culture shock to me. I was like, oh, this entire theater company, everybody is white in the show, and then this one everyone is Black, and this one everyone is Arab. It's like divided by that, and I had never seen that before. And so that was part of the reason why I wanted to what came up with the idea of Black and Brown Theater, as with a group of individuals, because I wanted to see and I wanted to make that cross-cultural connection a a foundation to the work, that you would always come to these shows and see multiple races of people working together on stage at the same time. Black and Brown Theater Company is a theater company devoted to creating opportunities for theater artists of color and the communities they are part of. We added that last part of the mission statement a few years back because community work is so embedded in what we do. Oftentimes, actors will ask something like, "Are you going to do The Lion King anytime soon?" And I love The Lion King. If you want to give me free tickets to see Broadway and Detroit's production, I'll go anytime. However, that's not what I envision Black and Brown Theater doing, because we really want to tell the stories that resonate with communities that haven't been told before. And if we are going to take something like a classic fairy tale, we're going to ask, how can we flip it? How can we make it resonate with today's themes? So that's what we did with our last show. We were taking the idea of Snow White, but then saying, what about this story is dated and feels like it's left in the 1930s, and probably most of us are okay with it being left in the 1930s in those elements, and making it something that's 2021 and resonates with today. And then another big thing we do with community members is the Our Voices program. We started that in 2018, which was essentially asking this question of how do we flip what TYA is. For me, a lot of times TYA is adults directing children in a production. And so I asked, because that has been most of my experience, I asked, what would the flip be like if children were children were directing adults in a production? So children, we would teach students how to write the play, and then they would direct our company member actors in that play. So it's something that it was so fun to do, and we've continued to expand it and do smaller iterations and one-day workshops, as well as the full programs. And now with COVID, being able to film some of them has been wonderful. And we're looking for more ways that we can expand upon that product, potentially doing something with commercials. This summer is our plan, and having high school students write and direct commercials that our actors will bring to life. So I really love that power dynamic, but that's why we really thought it was important to add into that mission statement that community element, so that community members knew, audiences knew what they're getting into, but also that our actors and artists knew that if you're not interested in working with communities, that's fine, but we're probably not the right home for you artistically. Honestly, don't get critics to come to our shows. So I don't think we've ever received a critique for Black and Brown theater. We've submitted, but I don't think they've ever come. I don't know if you saw this like 2 years ago. I think there was all of this like uproar. People were really upset at a Michigan theater critic. I won't name any names, but I'll just say people were really upset, and people were commenting online and saying all of the things. And I was like, people were trying to get me to help, and I was like, honestly, I have nothing to say about this person because they've never critiqued any of my shows. So I can't jump on the train and say that they said these negative things or they had these biases, because they've never critiqued my show at all. So I support you all in your frustrations, but there's a whole nother privilege wheel that people didn't even think about, that some people didn't even get critiqued. And it's not just Black and Brown theater. There's also people doing theater in the Northwest Activity Center. There's people doing theater all over Detroit who never get a critic and never get even considered by some of these Southeast Michigan theater critics or Southeast Michigan theater award companies. For actors of color, if they look at a white company's page and just see all these white shows, or inversely, they just see a lot of like Black and Latino trauma shows. That's another thing that I think a lot of white companies get really excited about these shows, and and some of them are probably really, really great and really, really powerful. But they have to remember that the Black trauma shows often speak to white audiences. They really resonate with white audiences. They really teach white audience certain things, and not every actor of color wants to be in that type of show. So you also have to think about, how do you create a balance that balances out these types of shows. And um, and then I think if they can hire directors of color, that really does help, so then they can use their networks to cast people that they're already familiar with. I think so often we have this idea of like the director being the all-knowing omniscient power, uh and for me, I'm super collaborative in my style, and sometimes actors don't know what to do with that. They're like, I don't think he knows what he wants. It's like, no, what I want is your involvement in this decision making. So I think we're gonna have to like mold actors and all theater artists into that idea that leadership can be collaborative, and that you can take opinions from an actor and you can ask an actor, how would you be able to bring yourself best to this character? What hairstyle would that be? And you can build a character around that. I know for me, going into this process for Mirror on the Wall, some of the actors were asking me, how do you want the character to be? And I said, I don't know yet because I haven't met you. And I need 1 week with you before I give you an exact answer, because I wanted to see their authentic selves in the character. I wanted to be able to say that I want this reaction to happen here. And then when they say, who would give that kind of reaction? Then I say, you remember when you were asking for Gatorade during the rehearsal break and you made this weird face? That's the same face I want on film when we shoot this. And they were able to say, you were looking at my face. Okay. And then I say, yes, that face you're giving me right now, call action. Let's give that, so that I can build the characters around what they authentically are, rather than coming with an idea and trying to get people to fit a mold. Then we're both going to be frustrated the whole time. The actor is going to be frustrated because they can't actually give me that, because it's impossible to read my mind. And I'm going to be frustrated because it's impossible to communicate exactly what's in my head to somebody outside of my head. But instead, if I work backwards and meet the person and envision the character with the traits that they already have, that I see them exhibiting all throughout rehearsal and all throughout the breaks when I'm spying on them and they don't realize that. And it sounds a little creepy to say that out loud, but but that's how I think we make an interesting character. And so how do you involve the actors in that decision-making process so that they feel more invested too, and they feel like the work is something that they're proud of? Because we know, especially in this small Southeast Michigan theater scene, we rely so much on everybody's excitement about the project too, because that helps generate the word of the mouth. And I think that the more you can lend the leadership and the ownership feeling more collaborative, the more it'll benefit in all aspects of the production. It'll feel more authentic, everyone will feel more invested, and the audience will feel like they're meeting real people by watching this. That is oftentimes how people feel. And a lot of times directors will come and tell me, oh, this person dropped out, or I don't want to work with this person because they have a reputation of dropping out of a project. And there's so many actors that I've worked with who have a reputation of dropping out of projects that have not dropped out of the project. So as much as people critique me and say, oh, you don't know what you want as a director, you don't come planned or prepared with a director, I can't remember the last time someone dropped out of a project with me, because that is I want them to feel so invested. I want them to feel like they can't be replaced. That if you drop out of this project, the whole thing falls apart. And I think when people have that ownership, then they're less likely to drop out of the project, because then they feel like they're affecting everyone, versus if you make them feel replaced and this is exactly the character I want here, mold into this, then it's like, oh, well, I can just drop out and you'll find someone else who can mold into that. But if it's, I'm building the character around you and you were cast because of what you can do to this person, how you two affect each other, what your chemistry is like, and what your chemistry is like with this person, and all of you together create a puzzle that if you jump out, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find someone to, I can't find someone to fit that exact piece. You're the snowflake that is in this puzzle, and snowflakes can't be replicated. So, one thing that I learned from my dad as a teacher, he always says that every student has a different learning style. So you need to ask them, how do you learn best? So that way you don't run into a problem later. So I started asking my actors that from day one. How do you take a note best, and what kind of note will shut you down? And if you're not aware of that, I want you to become aware of that through that process. And I need you to communicate to me when that happens, so that we can avoid that. Or if it does happen, we can correct it. And I have noticed that actors, the reason why I enjoy working with actors more and more is the same actors, is because then they learn. Because when I first asked them that, if it's my first time working with them, they never have an answer because they've never been asked that before. So they don't know how to answer what, I don't know what shuts me down. I just say whatever the director wants. I don't know what works best. I just do whatever the director tells me. And so then we kind of have to build the car as we drive it and learn in real time. But I always still try to ask from the beginning, because I think that creates a space that the only risk you have as a director is that they see you as not being experienced as a director. And if that's their thing, Google me, check my resume. But the benefit of it in turn for that is that they get to feel like they have ownership, and they can feel like if the space becomes unsafe, that they can steer you back into a direction where the space becomes safe again. I don't want to put down anyone who wants to write that style, because I think we should never censor the voices of people of color because they've been silenced for so long. But sometimes I do see these plays that are written by artists of color, and I'm wondering, is that actually the story you wanted to tell? Or did you think with the strategy of this will get produced and this will get a bunch of productions? Is that the story that you want to share with your mom and dad? Or is that the story that you have to hide from your mom and dad because they know they wouldn't be comfortable, they wouldn't be proud of it, or they wouldn't be comfortable with it, but you know that a white theater will do it? And so oftentimes these stories that I see that are, stories of trauma, or stories that create this narrative that people of color only existed in the past, or only existed up until 1960, or only existed from slavery till segregation, and then everything before and after didn't exist, like continents having kings and queens and rulers and power systems, that didn't exist. We all start with slavery in America and we'll end with segregation in America. And so a lot of times things that take place in that time period, and I'm critiquing myself at the same time because I'm writing a play that's in the 1930s right now. But so I can't point the finger at anyone. I have to be careful because there's three pointing back at me. But when I do see those, I often just think, do we need another one? What are you going to do different about this one that'll make it stand out? But then at the same time, I have to wonder, um, are is it because they know that theater companies will do it? And this one that I'm doing that's set in the 1930s, I pitched to a white company. So I'm working on it right now because a white company is asking me to work on it. And I had some other ideas that I just wasn't sure if a white company was going to say. I was like, there's no way a white company wants to see a romantic comedy with all people of color. They're going to say, what? We've already seen, why would we do a stage version of romantic comedy? And I'm thinking at them like, because when I did a 10-minute version at the Wright Museum, and there was all these other, we did all these 10-minute plays in our showcase, and there was some about trauma, and there was some that the white companies would do about the people of color being poor in the 30s and struggling. And and then the audience had asked questions. Every single question was about the romantic comedy. Did that boost my ego a little bit because I wrote it? I was the one who wrote it, yeah. But also it was just really cool to see that that is what resonated with people, and that audience was predominantly people of color because it was at the Wright Museum. I wish that more white theaters could see that, because then I think it would change what writers of color are writing. I think if writers of color who understand why they want to work for white theater companies, because sometimes the pay is great, they'll fly you out and the exposure is great and you might get nominated for this award. But if they could see that the audience could change if you give the audience what they want, if we think of theater as more consumer centrist rather than ego centrist or trying to get an award, um, I think that would lead to so much more theater that I'm interested in, and that audiences of color are interested in, and that theater artists of color could bring their families to, and their families could go and see a show and be like, oh, that's really cool, and I understood that and I liked it, and it wasn't weird on purpose. It was just a simple story that I understood and enjoyed. So that's what I would like to see more of. But I think all hands on deck have to be a part of putting it out there. Now that we're in quarantine and everything's a Zoom play, or everything's a play digitally, or even if it's filmed live, but then they're watching it from their home. I think this is a great time for theaters to pay attention to what are people actually watching, because now you can't perform and show all of your friends that you saw this play, or oh, look at me, I went and supported this production about racism, I'm so woke. People don't get to do that now. So now you get to actually see what people actually want to spend their money seeing or spend their time watching. And I think this is really important for theaters to pay attention and start tracking this, and watch those YouTube videos, or watch those Instagram clips, or watch the Zoom play tracking, see how many people purchase a ticket to these different types of plays. And is it the plays that you have been producing now? Because people have been performing that they want to be a part of that audience, but now there's no audience for them to perform for. So we can really see what people are interested in now. And I think now is the time to start paying attention. What's your highest selling Zoom player? What's your highest selling recorded player? What's your highest selling whatever digital way that you're presenting plays? And then bring that knowledge into 2022 when we do start presenting plays live again. I do think we need to create more lanes for this type of theater to be produced, but I think we also have to support, because we live in a cancel culture right now, which is fine because there are things that should have been canceled that are being canceled, and there are some things that need to be held accountable. But I think it needs to come in a balance, because right now I feel like everyone is devoting, let me not say everyone, a lot of people are devoting 100% of their time towards canceling and highlighting what is terrible, and 0% of their time just uplifting what is powerful and important. And so I think that what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that people are going to continue to create these great structures that are more representative, but they're not going to get support because everyone's just going to devote 100% of their attention to canceling. I want to see us move into a place where we can still hold people accountable, but maybe that becomes like 30% of our energy and 70% becomes uplifting the great work that is being done, because there's so much great work that gets overshadowed because people are spending 100% of their time trying to cancel or take down the terrible bad guy systems that the good guy is not even noticed. It's like all of the praise is going to the Green Goblin and everyone's ignoring Spider-Man. When did this happen? I don't think yet, which is why I've taken a hiatus from acting. And some people have asked me, "Are you going to act, or what do you want to do as an actor?" Or, people have offered me roles, and right now there's nothing that I really, really, really want to be in. I really am enjoying the process of creating and creating that opportunity for other people, and the hope is that they'll continue that momentum, and I want to be a part of building a legacy that lives after I live on, so that if I don't have children, I don't have whatever to pass down the legacy, I have this work that hopefully, whether or not people attach my name with it, they'll continue on with that work. But I have not had the pleasure of having a show where I really, really identified with a character. There have been shows that have been fun to do, and there have been shows that have been fun to stretch me outside of my character. But I don't think I've ever gotten to play a gay character in a relationship with a man. I think I've gotten to play a character that said they were gay, but you never got to like see any interaction. But I've never got to play. I auditioned for one once, and I made it to the callback, and I was so bummed when I didn't get it because I wanted it so bad. And then I saw the production. This is in California, so this is no shade to anyone in Michigan. But I saw the production, and then I was like, God was looking out for me on that one. I didn't need to be in it. But yeah, I think maybe someday if someone wrote the right play, I would do it. But right now I'm kind of comfortable sitting on the outside. One time in college, but I think I was still in the closet, so it was like my whole life felt like a performance. And then I think after college, I I did do a show with Performance Network that the character was actually gay, but they had a intimate scene with a woman, so that character was struggling through that identity crisis. So I felt like I could go back in time to connect with that, but that wasn't where I was currently in that point in my life. So it was really hard, but I didn't mind it because I felt like it was well written, and it was a fun project to do. But it was like, oh, I should have played that in college when I was in that point, because now I'm past that point, and so it's like looking back on that. If I were to say that was probably one of my favorite roles, and it also was let me be clear. I want to play a role that is written for a Latino man. I want to play a role that is written for a person of color, but I don't want it to feel like that is the only thing that's important about the character. And so this character was not written for a person of color, and everyone I was called back with was white. So when I got that spot, I was like, hell yeah. Like I beat out all them. The tables are turned. So I was really excited to play that role. And I think that was probably one of my favorite roles. It's just the earlier question when you had asked like, is there one role that is like authentically you? I don't think that was fully authentically me, but it was a role that I was really excited about playing. And I would maybe go back and do it if I didn't look 30 now. But if I still look 16, I'd go back and do it again. Haven't come up with clear guidelines. I think we have just now entered the space where we're coming up with clear guidelines about race.
Yes.
I think for a while it's probably been like black and white has been really clear, like, oh, a white person can't play a black person, but it, and all races can't play a black actor, but that like Arab and Latino has been really unclear for a long time. And I've been cast in Arab roles, and I've noticed and other Latino actors as well. And I've also noticed Arab American actors being cast in Latino roles and Arab American actors being cast in Asian American roles. So that line I think is still really blurry, that we haven't come up with. I think 2020 is going to be a pivot year for us, but pre 2020, if we look back, there's probably in between that space in between black and white, there's probably been a lot of blurriness there. And now I think we're having that conversation about like trans, who can play a trans character, which I think the best way to look at this argument that I've been educated is just the ways, and if we look at it through the lens of could a trans actor, how often does a trans actor get to play a non-trans role? And I think that's for me where it makes sense, where right now I think a lot of those trans roles should be given to trans people. Maybe 200 years from now we'll be in a place where everyone's playing everyone, and we won't think about it that much. But yeah, and I'm honestly, even as a part of the LGBT community, I don't know about straight actors playing gay characters. I don't know what the answer is on that right now. One teacher back in high school was trying, or back in college was trying to get me to express that I was gay, but I wasn't ready for that. And I think now we live in a different world where like people are coming out in high school and going to prom with the same gendered person, and then everyone's like cheering them on and voting them prom king and king and prom queen and queen, and it's, or prom ace for like gender non-conforming people now, which is awesome. And I wish that my high school had had that experience, but we didn't. So I was transitioning right from that into college, and I just wasn't ready to express that part of my identity. But I will say, this kind of is a little bit off topic, but in college, I took a poetry class, but the teacher said the first poem I wrote, they were just like, this doesn't feel like authentically you. And it was crazy because it felt like I was like literally writing out of my diary, journal, or whatever you want to call it. And then I was just like, what do they want me to write about? And then I was like, you know what? I'm the only Latino person in this class. I just took a Chicano Latino studies class. Let me just make up this character who's Latino and he's poor, and he's like, his dad is like selling tacos, and he's just like, when is my dad gonna come home from selling tacos? Now, meanwhile, if y'all were listening, I just told you that my dad was a teacher. So my dad was not selling tacos. But I was like, let me just see what happens. And I write about this poor taco selling dad and this son, and he's just waiting at home for his dad, and he's throwing a yo-yo across the room, and like, donde está mi papa? And the teacher gave me an A on that project and said, finally you found your voice. And I was just like, is it my voice?
Oh, wow.
I don't even speak Spanish. I just, my dad does speak Spanish. And so I like, there's phrases I've heard because my family, speaks Spanish, but I would not be able to carry on a conversation with someone in Spanish, and I don't think in Spanish. I have to like translate if I'm gonna talk to someone in Spanish, and I have to be like, slow down, más despacio, por favor. And so like I'm writing this whole piece of like fake bad butchered Spanish, and they're just like, you found your
That's
voice.
Oh my
And I'm like,
gosh.
oh goodness, is it? So I think yeah, that's a perfect example of people like trying to be well-intentioned, and he was trying to encourage me to be what he thought maybe he thought I was. And it it just wasn't. So that was a teachable moment for me. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with writers writing some of these players of color writing some of these tragedy plays or trauma plays, because they think they're conditioned from college, from high school, sometimes even, of, oh, that's because they read The Bluest Eye in high school, or they read Raising the Sun in high school, and they're like, okay, got it. And then they go to college and they read these other things, and they're all tragedy and trauma plays that are sometimes are beautifully written, but it doesn't, there's not a lot of space encouraging writers to say like, okay, this was what was done in 1950 and this probably was their experience, it probably was really hard. You live in a different era where it's also, you also might have some challenging experiences, but you also might have some successes, and you might also have some really positive things that you want to share and ways that you want to see yourself, or positive experiences that you've had just within your community, not experiencing with people outside of your community. And I think that that just doesn't get showcased enough, and that that platform isn't created. So that's why we keep seeing the same plays go through the pipeline, even if they're by writers of color, honestly. It was based on a story that my mom was wanting to write about a kid waiting for their dad to come back from the army, being on an army assignment, and and that was my true experience. And I remember, and I even put in the poem an actual truthful thing, which is that my obsession for Mariah Carey comes because the first time my dad went on a long army trip, we used to just call him daddies in the field. I didn't know what he was doing or if he was in war or what. I honestly can't tell you what he was actually doing, but he was just away for long periods of time. And he had given me Mariah Carey's #1 CD, and it was all of Mariah Carey. So I played that record over and over again. I could memorize every Mariah Carey lick. And if I could sing on key, there's no way I would not have become a singer right now because of that album. And I incorporated that. So I think he's looking at me like, okay, you're a Latino man obsessed with this like biracial woman from the 90s who was a pop singer talking about military, maybe not knowing that I had a military father. And so then he's making all these judgments of like, this is everything about this is not you. And from my personal experience, it like everything about it couldn't have been more me. Mariah Carey, military dad. I'm like, what else do you need to know about my childhood? I feel like I summed up my childhood for you in that poem. But it didn't, he didn't see that as clicking with me. Cinderella with Brandy was I also got to see it with Kiki Palmer on Broadway, and she was wonderful too. And Kiki Palmer is the nicest woman ever, the nicest celebrity I've ever met. I have to say, because I've met some celebrities that I have completely different opinions of them after seeing them. No disrespect to Catherine McPhee. I think she was just really busy that day that I met her, but I felt a lot differently after I met her after her concert, and I gave her flowers. Versus Kiki Palmer. So let me focus on the positive, not the negative. Sweetest woman. I'd also given her flowers, and she was so thankful. And she like took her picture, and she was like, "Mom, look at they got me flowers." And so she was wonderful in Cinderella. But I will say specifically about the Brandy Cinderella, what I loved is that they thought so carefully about how to cast all of the roles that they would avoid some of the criticisms that could have happened. So even like a lot of white women had turned down the queen role or the stepmother role before Bernadette Peters, because they were like, what are the optics going to be like if I'm yelling at Brandy, who's playing Cinderella, then it's going to be white woman yelling at a black woman. And so I love that they then had Natalie Dreisel play the stepsister. So then it was like, oh no, she's being really nice to this woman who's also black. So it's not just the race, there has to be something else that's there. So they thought about that consciously when they were making the casting. And then having the fairy godmother be played by Whitney Houston, and some people were just like, yay, it's Whitney Houston. But other of us were looking at it like, no, they thought about that specifically. So that's not a white woman saving a black woman. It's a black woman saving a black woman and showcasing what the power of community and helping your people out represents. And then the queen being Whoopi Goldberg. So then you had all of the different layers that black woman could be. It would be like, you could be at the top, like Whoopi Goldberg as a queen. You could be coming from the bottom, rising to the top, like Brandy as Cinderella, who was, you know, working in the house and then became a princess. And then you could have the fairy godmother who's helping someone go from the top to the bottom. So it was so carefully crafted the way that the roles were placed, but then also that it wasn't an all black production, because if it was an all black production, then you wouldn't be able to say that they carefully
Yep.
crafted who was Black. But they, because it was a multiracial production, then it was like, oh, it was very specifically intended which one of these roles would be played by a Black woman that would feel uplifting and support the casting of Brandy in the lead role, rather than her being token or um, representative just to fill a quota. It was like, no, they built it around her so that she wouldn't feel like a quota, and that it felt purposeful every spot that where they put a Black woman in the casting. So I think that was incredibly done. I wish they had done more of that series. I know they had done like Once Upon a Mattress, but they didn't cast it the same way. And then I think the series ended after that. But I wish they bring back that Wonderful World of Disney series. I know they did like NBC and Fox started doing the musicals, but I don't know, it just never felt the same. I've always wanted Raven Simone to be Princess Winifred in Once Upon a Mattress. And I would, I've thought about how I would cast all the other, like Kiki Palmer could be the Lady Larkin, and um, uh, who's who's that little boy? Jordan Fisher could be the Lady Larkin's prince, and just thinking about like a mix of people that Mario Lopez could play the king who can't talk, and I just think it would be like so cool to flip that story, and I would love to see Raven Simone do it because she is the queen of physical comedy. I feel like she is our generation's Carol Burnett, our generation's Lucille Ball, and people don't give her enough credit for that. And if we go back and look at what she did for Disney Channel, she pioneered that Disney Channel switch that made them, she was the direct correlation from when Disney was able to beat out Nickelodeon in young viewers, because Nickelodeon dominated the 90s with the cartoons, the Hey Arnold, the Doug, the Rugrats, all of that. Nickelodeon was kicking Disney's butt. All they had was Mickey Mouse Club, and that wasn't able to compete with all that Nickelodeon had. Then Raven Simone, they created That's So Raven, and that led to this whole genre of like tween. They had tapped into the tween market that no one had even thought of tapping into, and that led into Hannah Montana and Wizards of Waverly Place and all that stuff that was just like, then Disney completely overshadowed Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon tried to do that stuff with like Victorious and Cat and iCarly and all of that, but they were never able to catch up with Disney, because Disney had created that huge platform that Raven single-handedly created, and Raven was what made people tune in and excited about that. And I feel like she's never gotten her credit for that. So I would love to see her be Princess Winifred, Once Upon a Mattress, 2023. Give us a little time to build up an audience and feel safe and everyone vaccinated, and then give me $2 million and I'm gonna make this happen with Raven Simone and some other celebrities. I just wanted to elaborate on that idea of being consumer centrist, because I think that's something that I'm so interested in. And I think for so long we asked, how do we get communities or groups or people to come see the work that we want to create, which is such a weird structure to me, because it's like the least businessy mindset you could have. Like, can you imagine Coca-Cola being like, how do we get people to like our Coca-Cola? It's like, no, they make the Coca-Cola that people want to drink. They instead ask, what do people like about Coca-Cola? What do people like about soda? What have we not tapped into about soda? People are really interested in fruity flavors now. Okay, we're gonna drop cherries in our soda, and we'll have wild cherry Coca-Cola. And then that's how they build their market. But then for theater, for some reason, it's like, let's keep doing things the way that we've been doing them for years, even though it's never brought in an audience outside of the audience we currently have. And then let's come up with strategies of how we can force audiences to see these plays that they really don't want to see. And it's just so fascinating to me. My mind still just like wraps around that idea, instead of like, how do we do more plays that correlate with different audiences, or tap into interests that people already have, or changing the way that it's produced, changing the length of a play. Why does it have to be 90 minutes to 2 hours? Why can't it be a shorter play? Is it just because this audience you already have is saying that it won't be worth their money? Because people will spend $75 to see Solange sing for 60 minutes and not want a refund at all and be totally fulfilled and satisfied. I was one of those people. and and I was totally satisfied, and I felt like I had every penny worth, and I would spend it. And that's the other thing people too say is like, theater's so expensive and da da da, and it is, and we could do a better job of that. But also, people will spend money on what they want to see, because when I saw Solange, I was broke as he double hockey sticks, but I found a way to get that $75 to see Solange because I wanted to see Solange, and there was nothing more that I wanted to spend my $75 on than that. I want to see her more than I want to see any play. I want to see her more than I want to see any movie. I want to see her more than I want to see anybody else's concert. So it was no problem for me to spend $75. Same thing, Danny Kane came and they charged $40, and I said, I cannot wait. And they had to drop the ticket prices to $10. And I was like, I wasn't even mad that I spent $40, because I was like, this is a group I want to see, and I will spend my $40 on this. So I think the more that we create theater that people want to see, then we can justify why, because I think that's people's argument, right? Of like, we can't make this any cheaper than what it is unless we get a grant. And so yes, keep applying for the grants, but also create theater that people want to see, because people are not poor. I don't like when people talk about people of color under one umbrella as being poor. Just because I'm poor, that doesn't mean my mom's not poor, my dad's not poor. They have money, they'll spend it on something that they want to see. But if they don't want to see it, they're not going to waste their money on it. I wish I could shout out the company, but the name's escaping me right now. But they have 6 artistic directors, and I think 3 of them are women, and 3 are people of color, and one of them might overlap with, because there is like a white guy in there, but so there is some overlap. But I also think that white guy is part of the LGBT community. So like they really intentionally thought about who their leaders were, because we also come from the same way. Like people think it's weird when I get people's opinion as a director. I also want people's opinion as an artistic director too, in what goes in our season. And I feel like that people devalue that and say like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what you want, or like you're not a good leader, or you can't make a decision by yourself. That's like the structure that we've been created to believe. And what I love about this group, this company, is that they have 6 people sharing decision, and they come up with their own shared leadership strategies and practices, and ways that they handle conflict resolution when they don't all agree with each other. How do they have a consensus and whatnot to just ultimately decide what's going to be on the stage? And I think if more companies had more leaders and more people at the top making that decision, that would be so beneficial to how many people are being represented, what's being represented, the variety of content. And I'll tell you that I went to a training for these Detroit theater companies, and I'm not going to name the theater because there was 2 of them. But when I told them that I asked my board what they wanted to see in our scene, both of these artistic directors looked at me like I was crazy. And one of these artistic directors said, why would you ever ask a board what they want? They're there to raise money for you. I won't call them out. I won't say it, but I swear to y'all, it was a company in Detroit. That's all I'm going to say. So that idea of collaborative leadership and collective leadership is something that we're going to have to work towards. We don't have it set up right now, and it's not normal. But I think if we do make it normal, we're going to see so much more variety in content, and we're going to be able to reach so many more people. And that it's not just a numbers game. Just because you have 4 people, if they all think the same, that's of no value. But if you have 6 people like this company did, and they were all representing different communities, and they disagree with each other so much that they had to come up with a consensus form, I think that's where the breakthroughs are going to happen. And that's where they're going to get shows that they have never had before and take some risk. But those risks, if they market them correctly, can lead to new audiences that will hopefully come back, and new people that will want to work with them that will hopefully come back for other projects as well.